we'll start with introductions.
Done.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for taking the time to join today. We're doing a part of the Smart Campus series that we have going on. We have Discourse Analytics on the line today, who's going to talk about some interesting projects they've been working on as Microsoft partners across the higher education and education in general. They're a very trusted partner. We work with them quite a lot, and wanted to give you guys some visibility to some interesting projects that we have working on. On the line, we also have Bob and Amy from the Microsoft team, and then we have a few other folks from different universities within SUNY and elsewhere joining as well. So feel free, if you have questions, to drop them right in the IM window. And would you like to get started?
Sure. Let me just turn off my notifications here so nothing embarrassing happens.
Totally understood.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. We're really pleased to have a chance to talk to you. My name is Asil Ahmad. I'm one of the co-founders of Discourse Analytics, where I am responsible for a lot of our product development work and a lot of our customer success work. And what that means is that I spend a lot of time talking with folks in the higher education space, from admissions offices to academic advising teams to provosts and vice provosts responsible for understanding how students are performing. And what we're helping in the space is to essentially provide a new way to understand student mindsets, and then using those mindsets to become more proactive in delivering interventions that help those students get through the journey of being in college and succeeded in college. So if you assume for a moment that a student who has access to a really good mentor or coach tends to kind of make their way or find their way through that experience, whether they're at a community college or an R1 research institution or even a for-profit school, that they're better off with that guidance and that sort of more consistent advising. The reality is that advising and coaching and mentoring, on the one hand, there's a demand issue where not all students know how to ask for that and how to create those relationships. And on the other hand, there's resource constraints. I talked with someone not long ago who told me that the advisor-student ratio at their school was in excess of like 1,000 to 1. And so obviously in that scenario, the job of the advisor becomes almost impossible to really reach all the students that might need help along the way. And what we've built is a way, we think, a powerful way to supplement and to augment the work of advising in order to make those teams more effective and to be able to scale better, reach more students. So some of the things that we think we're able to, and everyone can see my screen, right? I'm sharing properly?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So we view there's opportunity to have impact in the student journey from the minute a student requests information about the school, all the way through to getting, admitted students to deposit, deposited students to enroll, and then once students are enrolled, to kind of help them stay in longer, ultimately getting to graduation. And then even once they've graduated, to look at that alumni relationship in new and interesting ways, to both keep them engaged with the school, as well as eventually, when it comes to alumni contributions and all that stuff, career enhancement, career development, things like that. How do we do it? Essentially, what Discourse Analytics has built a technology platform around is the concept of nudging. I'm not sure if any of you followed the Nobel Prize givings this year, but the Nobel Prize in Economics went to Richard Thaler, who was the economist at University of Chicago, who's written several sort of seminal books in the space of behavioral economics, behavioral science. The idea being that the assumption that all humans are rational actors and act in certain ways that are in their best interests, falls flat on its face when you actually look at how humans behave. Humans behave and do things for all sorts of different reasons, which aren't theoretically the way they should do things. And there's a lot of reasons for that I'm sure everyone knows. We all have our biases and our backgrounds and our experiences. And so nudge, the concept of nudging is what actions can you take or deploy that might motivate someone to do something in a different way. So for example, if you have a student who is has an undeclared major, let's say in the second semester of their sophomore year, you can obviously tell all those students you need to declare a major right now, right? It's the deadline. You might also think, well, why is this student even in college in the first place? So some of them might be there because their parents forced them to go, and some of them might be there because they want to go to medical school, and some of them might have grand aspirations, but they're not quite sure what they want to do, but they just need a little bit of guidance on how to get to the answer. And so nudging them to declare a major might actually take a slightly different approach depending on that student's mindset. Now, how would you know the mindset? Well, you'd have to get in front of them, talk with them, go back and forth and figure out, what's motivating this person and what's motivating that person. And that's inherently a tedious and time-consuming process. What we do is we build a model of that student's mindset around things like proactivity when it comes to their finances, and focus when it comes to their academics, and resiliency and discipline and social intelligence. We basically took a body of research, peer-reviewed research, around the non-cognitive factors that are tied to student retention and success, and built a data model around that to say, if we observe in the data this behavior, we're going to interpret that as an indication of high self-discipline or low social intelligence or high social intelligence. And we're going to look at all those signals that are coming in from learning management systems, from student information systems, from admissions application systems, to come up with a profile of that student. Not based on their demographics, because we know that demographics only go so far in predicting, let alone prescribing interventions. Predicting outcomes, let alone prescribing interventions. Once we have those profiles of 5,000 or 10,000 or 50,000 students, we can then start to match them with interventions that our data set, our model, is beginning to understand. This intervention does a great job of motivating this student to this particular outcome. We deliver that outcome, we wait and see whether it had the impact, and then that learning starts to happen, and it feeds back into the data model. So the next time we see a student that has that profile and that set of requirements or challenges or obstacles, this is the intervention that we think the system is going to present, and so on and so forth. And so what you're getting from discourse analytics is not just the learning that's happening from your team of 5 or 10 or 50 academic advisors or faculty advisors or admissions office counselors, but all the learning that we're gathering from all the other clients that we're working with. We're really building this knowledge base of what works. Again, not based on geography or demographics, but based on what's actually driving the student there. Let me pause for a second. I just kind of rattled off for a minute there. Any questions so far about what I've said? Okay. Like I said earlier, we think there's real value here at every stage in the student's journey, whether it's identifying the types of students who are more likely to enroll, and then optimizing the admissions office process around attracting those students with the right message, the right sort of pitch as to what the school has to offer. We think there's a strong value in terms of just the admissions process itself and and adding to the data that admissions counselors have to sort of admit the best possible class that they can. There's the summertime melt issue of students that deposit but don't enroll. And again, what's the pitch that we're using to kind of keep them engaged? It's obviously getting more and more competitive in the summertime, and some students are depositing at more than one school. Then once students get enrolled, imagine knowing on day one that you have, a class of, let's say, 1,000 students or whatever, and while 200 of them were valedictorians, and you'd think these guys are going to do well, half of them had really low discipline, really low resiliency profile scores. And so you have 100 students that, are not on your radar at all in terms of being at risk, quote unquote, at risk. And yet after the first semester, you start finding kids dropping out, you start finding kids getting C's and D's, and you're like, wait a second, what happened? Oh, these guys kind of sailed through high school. And once they got here on campus, they found that it was like the real deal. They weren't ready for it. And so we could have allocated advising time, resources, modules for training and preparing them for, getting used to being a college student. And that's insight that you get on day one. You don't have to wait until, students already get to sort of the line there, that sort of the brink of, am I really getting value out of this college degree now? Like, maybe I should go do something else. And then, obviously, as students graduate, life situations change from, early career, mid-career, late career, from, being single to being married to having kids to being in a position to not donate but maybe participate other ways to being in a position to donate. And so what are all the ways that you can kind of optimize those relationships? So one of the things that, we're doing at Discourse Analytics is artificial intelligence. And it's a buzzword now where you can kind of sprinkle a little bit of artificial intelligence on everything. Where we think the rubber hits the road on AI and how it's going to actually be transformative in the higher education space is that, generic AI is great if you have a bunch of data scientists sitting around there helping you to make sense of the output of these different machine learning models. And if you don't have that, then out-of-the-box AI is kind of not that helpful, and you can get out-of-the-box AI from a lot of platforms. However, what we're doing is we're building a use case in higher education that makes sense and doesn't require you to sort of assign people on staff to kind of make sense of the data. This is sort of a product that plugs into workflows and works, and it helps those people doing the existing job of admissions or student retention success to do it better, to do it faster, to get deeper with students, to understand the student voice, understand the student mindset. And as we grow and as you grow, as more students go in, that learning continues to sort of inform the next iteration, the next cohort of students. So real quick, I mentioned the dimensions that we look at in terms of trying to understand the student voice. Again, we didn't come up with these on our own. Our platform essentially can be configured to handle all manners of let's call them customer situations. Like in this case, we're talking about students and what drives students, but we can look at, patients in a healthcare system. We can look at customers in a financial services institution. We essentially configure these dimensions around the research that already exists as to what really drives behavior, what drives outcomes in higher ed. Obviously, aptitude and how good someone is in math and chemistry is part of the picture, but we find that particularly among, first generation students, non-traditional students, continuing education students, it's not so much the aptitude issue as it is all these other issues that have to do with the overall preparedness and the sort of ability for someone to kind of cope with the experience of being at school. And, imagine knowing these things or having some level of confidence about your understanding of these things before the student even walks on campus, and creating a set of experiences and interventions and, preparing the faculty to be able to welcome those students in and really kind of talk with them in the voice that's going to make them feel like, these guys get it, and these guys know what it takes to help me succeed here. The cool thing about discourse analytics also is that the software embeds into where faculty and advisors and admissions officers and alumni coordinators are already doing their work. So we don't ask you to install anything. If you are a campus that uses Blackboard, or if you are a campus that uses Canvas, or if you're a campus that uses Slate or Salesforce, we actually plug into those systems. So we are a module that exists within the existing workflow. Microsoft Office, we have a plugin into Microsoft Office. So if your advisors are using Outlook and Word and Excel, as many of you are, I think we have an application that installs into the Office 365 environment. It handles all of the rostering stuff and all of the who's a student and who's a teacher and who's an advisor. All that stuff gets taken care of behind the scenes. What we make available is, here's an example of a student. We've pulled data in from the student from the LMS, from the SIS. We can take data from e-readers. We can take data from our widget that essentially engages in a one-on-one conversation, like a chatbot with the student. We actually have, right now in development, an Alexa skill. The first use case of the skill is helping students who are undeclared with their major to sort of get information to help them, to nudge them to get closer to declaring a major. So essentially, the student launches the skill asks a few questions, and it returns a recommendation of an article to read based on what our artificial intelligence machine learning platform has determined might be a good choice for this student to think about. And it'll text a link to their phone to say, hey, check this article out. So those are all places where we gather data. We build this profile, social intelligence, open-minded. Here in open-mindedness, because the red bar is pretty narrow, means that we've gotten a number of consistent signals to say that we're pretty sure where this person is on the open-mindedness scale, whereas with social intelligence, we're still looking for more data. So when the student comes in and speaks with an advisor or a dean, there's some insight here that we know something about this student: high resiliency, high motivation, right? If the numbers were on the opposite side of the scale, again, that's helpful information to know in figuring out what is the success plan for this student. What do I want to tell the student to do or advise them to do, whether it's, checking in with a professor, or maybe there's some resources on campus, head out to the career center or to the learning center, and all the things that might be already happening, but just like how to make sense of it, how to prescribe it in a more proactive way. We can also deliver those interventions, right? So in Canvas, for example, we can deliver the intervention directly to the student in their inbox. In Microsoft Office, we can insert calendar events into their calendar if they need to come in for a meeting, or if there's some event happening on campus that they should be participating in. And all that stuff gets tracked so that we can look and see, almost like a workflow management, case management type scenario. Any thoughts or questions so far on what I've shown you guys?
Great so far.
Okay. Let me jump over to a demo real quick. I'm going to show it in Canvas, just because there's a little bug in my Office demo right now, as would happen. So this is like probably any typical learning management system where there's courses, and the courses have all the course materials in there, and we're looking at that material saying, is this student turning assignments in early, late, or on time? Is this student participating in the online course messaging board or conversation board to show that they're kind of engaged in the class? Is the student even logging in? So what you're seeing here, and imagine being, let's say, an academic advisor and coming in on a Monday and thinking, what do I need to focus on today? I've got, some emails from some faculty members who have told me, so-and-so student, told me that they're going to miss some class because they had some family emergency, and, so-and-so student had some discipline issue or whatever, right? And so those emails are in there. I'm going to go through my list and start figuring out what do I need to do with these students. Imagine instead having an early warning alert system to say, Stacy here has 3 flags. Orange flag means that her cumulative GPA is precariously close to 2. The yellow flag is an indication that she hasn't logged, and this hasn't updated in a while, but she hasn't logged into Canvas to take action in a class that she's enrolled in. And you could configure it to 5 days, to 7 days, to 2 days, depending on what the preference is. So, she may not be engaged in the course, and that's an indication that maybe she hasn't turned assignments in, or she doesn't even know what the assignments are. And the red flag is that, she's got some pretty low grades in a class that she's currently enrolled in. So in critical thinking, her grade has dropped below 60. So that gives me, okay, I need to do something with Stacy. Okay, what's going on with Stacy? Her scores on these profile dimensions are pretty good. So this seems to be not what I'd expect with her. Down here you can see the sort of evolution of her profile dimensions over time as we've collected more data. So every time we see something, response to a survey question, assignment turned in ahead of time, that tells us a little bit more about these dimensions, and eventually these tend to level out the more data we get. That's how the model is designed to reduce uncertainty. So like here with the purple line, social intelligence was way up, then it went way down, but we've kind of figured out where she is, Then what we want to do is send out interventions. So, and this is where the Discourse Analytics product, I think, is most differentiated from other products on the market around student retention and success, is tell me what to do next, right? I don't have time to meet with 1,000 students, but if I know that there's 100 or 150 that I need to be engaged with, help me to simplify the workflow to be engaged with those students. And what Discourse Analytics has is this intervention library. We can ingest the interventions that are already being used on campus. We map them to those profile dimensions, and then we match them to each student's profile. So if this is the intervention, these aren't really tied to necessarily just the student retention workflow. This one has to do with an incomplete FAFSA application. But let's say the student needs some help with remedial work. You can click on this intervention, activate it. You can even edit it. Type in some stuff like there is a new program being offered, etc., and click send, and that goes straight to that student's inbox. The advisor keeps track of it. There's actually a history that you can see all the interventions that have been sent, and if that action has something which we can actually record in the data, for example, participation in some webinar or something, and we can track that, then we can even see that that intervention led to the completion of a task, which meant that that intervention worked. Now, we're working with some schools right now, and we just are kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's on a case study. The sort of early intervention alert framework has some measurable impact on some pretty important things. So, we know that doing this increases the level of student engagement with the LMS. And we know that up to a certain level, more engagement with the LMS is correlated with grades and outcomes, whether the student passed the class. So at a certain level, that starts to tail off. But if a student is disengaged and we can get them a little bit more engaged, that helps. We also showed at one school that this early intervention delivery framework has a positive impact on their grade in the class by, I think, 2 points. So, it's the first time we've been able to measure a positive impact on grades that's statistically significant just by getting the interventions. The other thing that we're building right now as well is, these flags are configurable based on the data that's available, but we can also, for example, give faculty the ability to kind of raise their own flag. So like I said, if a student is having some difficulty or some external challenge that the faculty, because the faculty are spending time with students every day and they have a lot of information, then the faculty can raise that flag and ask the advisor or the dean, whoever's sort of responsible for tracking that, to sort of step in and intervene. This is particularly helpful in schools that have a professional advising model, where faculty aren't really sort of expected to sort of do the heavy lifting there. So kind of getting back to the presentation, and let me run out and I'll open it up to questions. The other thing that I think differentiates Discourse Analytics from competitors is that we can get up and running pretty quickly. Integration usually takes less than 4 weeks, maybe 4 weeks max. And that means within 4 weeks, your employees, your advisors, your faculty have access to actionable information about students, an intervention library that they can start using, and start building metrics around whether these early proactive interventions are having impact on student outcomes. Here's just an example of how this plays out, sort of in terms of like the prescription, right? The prescription of what to do with the student. So here's a profile, low motivation, not very open-minded, not clear about their sort of future plans, but pretty confident about their abilities. We can actually look and see, profiles like this have a low or high likelihood of retention or dropout. And then, we can make the suggested interventions here in terms of, articles they should read or videos they should watch about, kind of coming up with a career plan or life plan. We can match with coaches that are sort of better suited to handling these types of situations. So not all coaches are the same. Some coaches are great for your sort of type A high achievers, and some coaches are great for your people that need more help and assistance on certain areas like discipline and motivation. And so those are all different ways of kind of personalizing the relationship with students, kind of getting their voice and kind of showing them that you care and that you're really trying to understand them better. I'm just going to put up one last slide. These are some of the academic underpinnings of the work that we're doing. I'm not sure if anyone on the phone is interested in that, but we can provide more information about this stuff if anyone wants to see it. So that's all I had on the demo and on our presentation. I wanted to leave enough time for people to either ask questions or have a conversation about what they're currently doing on student success and what types of tools are working, maybe what's not working and what's frustrating, and whether there's an opportunity to think about working together.
This is Bob from Microsoft. I've been multitasking a bit, watching or reading your case studies on your website while you've been presenting. It's some great stuff there.
Thanks, Bob.
So, last call here, I guess. If no one has any questions here, we can wrap up. We will be posting the video of this so you can share it with others in your organizations. All right, great.
Okay.
Thanks, Doug. And thanks to our friends from Discourse. And
thank you.
We'll send out an email soon, probably tomorrow, with a link so this can be shared with others. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.